Thank you, Rox. Thank you, Matthew. I'm not here to debate Matthew regarding Absorb. I think we all agree that Absorb, first generation device, is dead, and it's going to be very difficult to do CPR in this first gen device. I'm here to debate and to defend the concept of a technique, of a device that will do its job in the first few months to open the lumen, to keep the vessel against negative remodeling in the first few months, to deliver drug to the vessel wall to avoid intimal hyperplasia, and after 6 months to disappear. Why do you need a metal cage in your vessel? If you can, and if some smart engineers come up with good solutions to take care of obstructions, of coronary obstructions, and then disappear. So that's what I'm a believer. These are my conflicts. So I think that Matthew already mentioned to you some of the attributes that we have to change in the future generation devices. We learn a great deal with all the data that has been generated with Absorb. We certainly need thinner strut devices. So scaffold profile, strut thickness is going to be very important. We're going to have a device that has radial force. Remember, most of these devices are polymeric, kind of plastic material, so we need force to, again, to avoid negative remodeling, to have a good result, to push the plaque against the wall. We need devices that we will be able to see, so we can optimize the implantation, so visibility, radial opacity. Those devices will need to be strong against fracture, so we can, again, optimize the results. And again, not for five years of degradation and resorption. We need devices that goes away in 1 to 2 years. So talking about a scaffold profile, there is a good rationale for us to insist with the companies to decrease the strut thickness. Strut thickness can minimize areas of flow disturbance and reestablish regular flow dynamics sooner. So then this is going to be less thrombogenic for sure, and that's the signal we saw with first generation Absorb with 150 micron. So now we are building devices that are thinner in terms of strut thickness. Now you see that a lot of work has been generated from our core lab in São Paulo with Dr. Chamier. He analyzed more than 12,000 struts in multiple trials, and he learned that only half or even less than 50% of these patients had the struts not totally embedded into the vessel wall. So we believe that with thinner strut, with optimization of implantation, we're going to have more embedment into the vessel wall, into the plaque, and if we can achieve that, we can certainly be less thrombogenic. Some of the futuristic solutions I will be describing some of the devices that we've been testing in early phase studies. Dissolve by Elixir is certainly one example with 120 microns. You see the results of late loss. We didn't pay a high price of putting this device low in terms of efficacy, so 0.18 millimeters that compares with the first generation Dissolve with 150, 0.20 millimeters of late loss, so very good. Some fascinating features we might be able to incorporate into these futuristic devices, such as this one. When you do OCT and we see a couple of struts that are not completely opposed to the vessel wall, they can program the polymer to further expand and to, again, if you do OCT 30 minutes later, you see perfect apposition. So some of the features that we might see in these next-gen devices. This is a device that comes from Matthew's country, from India, very elaborated, and this is the BRS 100 microns, so even thinner with this hybrid design, open cells, closed cells at the end. So very interesting that releases sirolimus. Late loss in this first man, 117 patients, was 0.15 millimeters. We expanded to Europe and South America in addition of 64 patients with a lot of imaging. There was only a single patient with restenosis, and late loss was 0.18 millimeters. So it's okay to come down with the strut thickness. And these are OCT data coming from cardiologists, from Patrick Serais, showing that close to 100% of the struts are covered with tissue at the end of 6 months. You see a very good natural healing here at the end of 6 months. There is another company called Amaranth with multiple devices being tested, now getting to 80 micron, which mimics what we have with the best-in-class metallic scaffolds. Very good healing, very thin struts covered by tissue at the end of 6 months. Radial force, very important. We have one example of a metallic stent that goes away with magnesium. Very good acute result. We can be more aggressive with post-dilatation. Visibility. There are only few that can introduce a radiopaque scaffold, and this is Riva. The stent is called Phantom. They were able to bind iodine to polycarbonate of tyrosine. That's the polymer that they use, and you can see the entire length. Most of the scaffolds will have these radiopaque markers at the edges, but this one you can see the entire length of the scaffold. This is how the OCT looks like, very thin struts that reflects light as compared to the first generation absorb and dissolve that you see thicker strut and with a different OCT appearance. I just presented at PCR the clinical results, very low MACE rates, 5%, less than 3% of target lesion revascularization, few patients with MI. Late loss, very favorable, 0.25 and 0.23 in this first cohort of 240 patients. And again, very good healing documented by OCT. Fracture resistance, very important, so we can use higher pressure and bigger balloons. And you see that these next-gen devices with Dissolve NX, for instance, that you can go up to 1 or 1.5 millimeters and not cause any fracture. And the same with BRS from Mary Life Science, a company that is based in India, that you can put a 3.0 device and post-dilate with a 4.0, and you still keep the same architecture of the scaffold without causing any damage. So those are all good news. Degradation time, very, very important. I think that we can minimize some of the late events if the device goes away between 12, perhaps 18 months, and Dissolve is another example of that. There is a lot of data, and we can prove in men by doing OCT and seeing that the struts really go away at the end of 2 years. So this is my final take. I think that for us to have an ideal BRS, we're going to have a device that will be small in terms of strut thickness. Resorption time has to be faster. We have to be able to see those devices to optimize the implantation, keep good radial force, and again, be resistant of fracture. But again, to convince Roxana, I think we're going to have a lot of data. So there is a future for this device, but it's going to take some time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alex.